Hello, my name is William, and welcome to Dragon X Dominion, a realm where dragon legends are forged in fire, honor, and forgotten worlds. I will be your narrator and guide through these epic lands. If you crave powerful stories, legendary dragons, and wars that echo through eternity, then you found your home, ladies and gentlemen. So like, subscribe, and claim your place among these legends.
Roy Chun pulled another container from the conveyor belt and dumped its contents onto the sorting table. Broken electronics, shredded fabric, and something that might have been food once scattered across the metal surface. This was his life now. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, sorting through what people threw away at Clearwater Station. The station floated in orbit around Redstone, a colony world that had died 20 years ago. Most people left after the collapse, when the terraforming systems failed and the atmosphere turned toxic. But some stayed behind. People like Roy who had nowhere else to go and needed the steady paycheck. The consortium still paid well for waste processing, even in forgotten corners of space. Roy wiped sweat from his forehead and reached for the next container. His supervisor, Dennis Park, walked past without looking at him. That was fine. Roy preferred being invisible. He had been invisible his whole life. The night shift was ending when Roy found it. Container 743 came from a derelict transport ship that had been floating dead in space for who knew how long. The automated salvage drones brought it in last week. Most of the cargo was frozen solid, preserved in the vacuum. Roy opened the container and stopped. Among the twisted metal and frozen waste was something different. A crystalline object about the size of his torso, smooth and oval-shaped. It pulsed with faint light from somewhere deep inside. Colors swirled beneath the surface like oil on water that he checked the manifest. The container was listed as organic waste and scrap metal. Nothing about crystalline artifacts. Nothing about objects that glowed. Roy looked around. The processing floor was empty except for him. Dennis had gone to his office. The security cameras were old and half of them did not work anymore. Nobody would notice if one small object went missing from a container of garbage, that he wrapped the crystal in his work jacket and carried it to his quarters. His room was small. A bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom. One window that looked out at the curve of Redstone below. The planet was beautiful from orbit, swirls of red and orange clouds covering the surface. Hard to believe it was deadly down there. Roy set the crystal on his desk and studied it. The light inside grew brighter as it warmed up. He touched the surface. It was warm, almost hot. How was that possible? It had been frozen in space. He ran a basic scanner over it. The device beeped and showed results that made no sense. The crystal was organic. It had a cellular structure. It was alive. For 3 days, Roy watched it. He told Dennis he was sick and stayed in his quarters. The crystal grew warmer. The light inside became stronger. Hairline cracks appeared on the surface, spreading like a web on the third night. Roy woke to the sound of breaking glass. He jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. The crystal had shattered. Pieces lay scattered across his desk. And in the center of the debris was something impossible. A creature no bigger than a cat uncurled itself from the broken shell. Its body was covered in translucent scales that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. 2 wings, folded tight against its sides, were almost see-through like insect wings but shaped like bat wings. For legs ended in small claws. A long tail wrapped around itself. And the head was unmistakable. Roy had seen pictures in old Earth books. He knew what this was, even though it should not exist. A dragon. The hatchling made a sound, somewhere between a chirp and a whimper. It was shivering. Its scales, which should have been bright and strong, looked dull and fragile. The creature tried to stand, but its legs wobbled and it collapsed. Roy grabbed a heated blanket from his bed and wrapped the dragon carefully. The creature made that sound again, pressing against the warmth. Through the blanket, Roy could feel how cold it was, like holding ice that he needed to feed it. But what did dragons eat? The old stories said they ate meat and treasure. Roy had protein bars and recycled water. He tried offering a piece of protein bar. The dragon sniffed it and turned away. He tried water. The dragon lapped a little but seemed uninterested. Roy looked around his room desperately. There had to be something. His eyes landed on the broken crystal pieces. They contained minerals, compounds that had kept the egg alive in frozen space. Maybe the dragon needed minerals too. He went to the processing floor, moving quietly through the empty halls. In the mineral separation bay, raw compounds sat in containers waiting to be refined. Iron oxide, calcium carbonate, silicon compounds. Roy filled his pockets and hurried back. The dragon lifted its head when he returned. Roy spread the mineral powders on a plate. The dragon dragged itself forward and began eating. Not just eating, devouring. The small creature consumed minerals like it was starving. As Roy watched, he noticed the scales beginning to brighten. The dragon's movements became stronger. After eating, it looked up at him with eyes that glowed faint gold in the dim light. Roy reached out slowly. The dragon did not pull away. He touched the scales gently. They were warming up, getting harder. Then Roy's hand brushed against a sharp piece of broken crystal still on the desk. Pain shot through his palm as the edge cut deep. Blood welled up and dripped onto the desk. The dragon moved faster than Roy thought possible. Its tongue, rough and warm, licked the wound. And in that moment, everything changed. Roy felt something connect between them. Not physical, but deeper. He felt the dragon's hunger, not quite satisfied. He felt its fear of the cold and dark. He felt its relief at finding warmth and food and safety. And somehow, impossibly, he knew the dragon felt his emotions too. His surprise, his wonder, his fierce desire to protect this fragile creature. The dragon's eyes blazed bright gold. Roy gasped as images flooded his mind. Not his memories, but something older. He saw stars and worlds he had never visited. He saw creatures like this dragon, but massive, flying between planets. He saw humans and dragons together, not as master and pet, but as partners. Then the images faded. The dragon made a small sound, almost like a purr, and curled up in the heated blanket. Within seconds, it was asleep. Roy sat on his bed, staring at the creature, at his bleeding hand, at the broken crystal scattered across his desk. He had no idea what he had just found. He had no idea what he was going to do. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to let anyone take this dragon away. Whatever it took, he would keep it safe, even if the whole galaxy came looking for it. The dragon slept peacefully, scales shimmering in the soft light. And Roy Chun, invisible waste worker on a forgotten station, made a promise to a creature from legend that he would protect it, no matter what. 2 weeks passed, and Roy's life became a careful dance of secrets. Bright Scale, the name came to him one morning when light hit the dragon's scales just right, was growing fast. Too fast. What had been cat-sized was now as big as a large dog. The small quarters felt cramped with both of them inside. Feeding Brightscale was the hardest part. The dragon needed raw minerals and metals every day. Roy smuggled them from the processing facility, a little at a time, so nobody would notice. Iron filings in his lunchbox. Copper shavings in his pockets. Calcium tablets meant for the station's water treatment. The dragon could fly now, sort of, gliding from the bed to the desk, wings spread wide, and catching air that should not be enough to keep it aloft. Sometimes small flames leaked from Brightscale's nostrils when the dragon got excited. Roy had to hide scorch marks on the walls with posters and spare clothing. Their bond grew stronger each day. Roy no longer needed words to know what Brightscale wanted. He felt the dragon's moods like his own. Happiness when they were together. Restlessness for being cooped up. Curiosity about everything. And underneath it all, something else. Ancient knowledge that did not belong to a newborn creature. Memories inherited from parents Brightscale had never met. Dennis Park was getting suspicious. Roy called in sick too many times. He avoided the cafeteria. He left work immediately instead of joining other workers for cards or conversation. Roy caught Dennis watching him more than once with narrowed eyes. But the real problem was Lily Santos. She lived in the quarters next to his. A repair technician who worked on the station's aging systems. Lily was smart and observant and completely unwilling to mind her own business. She knocked on his door on a Tuesday evening. Roy had just finished feeding Brightscale, and the dragon was curled on the bed, scales glowing faintly in the dim light. "Roy, you in there?" Lily's voice came through the door. "I need to borrow your plasma wrench." Roy looked at Brightscale in panic. The dragon looked back calmly, then did something it had never done before. The glow faded from its scales. The light dimmed until Brightscale looked almost like a statue, gray and lifeless. Roy felt reassurance through their bond. "Trust me." He opened the door crack. Lily stood there in her work coveralls, grease on her hands and determination on her face. She was short, barely came up to his shoulder, but her presence filled the hallway. "Wrench is in my toolbox," Roy said. "Let me get it. I can grab it." Lily pushed past him before he could stop her. Roy's quarters were small enough that she saw everything immediately. The mineral containers on the desk, the scorch marks on the walls, the blankets piled on the bed in a nest-like arrangement. And Brightscale, frozen like a statue but impossible to miss. Lily stopped. She stared at the dragon for a long moment. Then she turned to Roy. "That's not a station cat," she said. "No," Roy agreed. There was no point lying. "That's a dragon." "Yes." Lily walked closer to Brightscale. The dragon remained still, barely breathing. She reached out slowly and touched one scale. Her eyes went wide. "It's warm. It's alive. Her name is Brightscale," Roy said quietly. "She hatched 2 weeks ago." The moment he said it, Brightscale moved. The scales brightened again. The dragon lifted her head and looked at Lily with those golden eyes. Roy felt what Brightscale felt. Curiosity. No threat detected. Possible friend. Lily stumbled backward and sat down hard on the floor. She stared up at the dragon, then at Roy, then back at Brightscale. "Dragons are extinct," she whispered. "They died in the Great War 300 years ago." "Not all of them," Roy said. "I found her egg in a container from a derelict ship. She was frozen in space, probably for decades. Maybe centuries." Lily's mind was racing. Roy could see it on her face. She was the kind of person who solved problems, who figured things out. After a long silence, she spoke. "The old legends say dragons were guardians. They bonded with other species and protected whole civilizations. Humans and dragons were partners once, before the consortium took over." "You believe the legends?" Roy asked. "I'm looking at a dragon in your quarters, Roy. I believe everything right now." Lily stood up slowly. "We need to talk about what happens next, because you can't keep her hidden here forever." They talked for hours. Lily knew things Roy did not. She spent her free time in the station's old archives, reading history files that most people ignored. She told him about the Great War, about how the consortium feared the partnership between humans and dragons. Bonded pairs were too powerful, too independent. They could not be controlled. The consortium hunted dragons to extinction. They destroyed the guardian temples. They erased history and turned dragons into myths, all to make sure humanity would be dependent on consortium protection instead of having their own guardians. "The eggs were hidden," Lily said. "Before the dragons died out, they scattered eggs across the galaxy in secret vaults. They hoped someday, when it was safe, the eggs would hatch and dragons would return." "Brightscale's egg was on a smuggler's ship," Roy said. "Someone found a vault, and someone else was tracking that ship." Lily pulled out a small data tablet. "I hacked into the station logs yesterday because I was curious about the weird power usage from your quarters. I found something else. The derelict that brought Brightscale's egg here was flagged by consortium trackers." Roy's blood went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means a hunter ship is coming. They call it the Iron Jaw. It's 6 days out and heading straight for Clearwater Station." Lily looked at Brightscale, who was listening intently. "They think there might be dragon genetic material on board. They don't know it already hatched. But when they get here, they'll find out." Brightscale made a low sound, almost a growl. Roy felt fear spike through their bond, but not Brightscale's fear. His fear. The dragon was picking up his emotions and reflecting them back. "We need to get her off the station," Roy said. "Where?" Lily asked. "The consortium controls every settled world within 100 light years. You can't run far enough." "Redstone," Roy said suddenly. The idea came from somewhere deep in his mind. Or maybe it came from Brightscale, from those inherited memories. "The old colony world below us. Redstone is toxic. Nothing lives there. but something used to live there. Before the collapse, before it was a colony. Roy stood up and paced. The memories were clearer now, coming through his bond with Brightscale. There was a place in the mountains, a sanctuary. Dragons and their companions gathered there thousands of years ago. Lily stared at him. How do you know that? Brightscale knows. Her ancestors knew. Roy looked at the dragon. If we can reach the sanctuary, she'll be safe. The consortium won't find her there. Getting to Redstone means going through a toxic atmosphere and electrical storms that will scramble any navigation system, Lily said. The shuttle you could afford wouldn't make it. Then we need a better shuttle. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, sharp and determined. Dennis Park has access to military shuttles. Old colony defense ships are still in Base 7, mothballed but functional. Dennis hates me, Roy said. Dennis hates everyone, but he might help anyway. Lily stood up. Let me talk to him. We've got 6 days before the hunters arrive. That's enough time if we move fast. She headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at Brightscale. Take care of her, Roy. She might be the last dragon in the galaxy. After Lily left, Roy sat beside Brightscale. The dragon pressed against him, seeking comfort. Through their bond, he felt her trust. She believed he would keep her safe. Roy just hoped he could live up to that faith. Dennis Park appeared at Roy's door the next morning before the day shift started. The supervisor looked tired, older than his 50 years. He did not say anything at first, just stood in the doorway staring at Brightscale. The dragon had grown again overnight. She was nearly the size of a small pony now, too big to hide effectively. Her scales had deepened to a rich gold color that caught the light and made the cramped quarters seem to glow. Lily told me, Dennis said finally. I didn't believe her. Thought she was playing some kind of joke. It's not a joke, Roy said carefully. Dennis stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He moved like a man walking through a dream, eyes fixed on Brightscale. The dragon watched him but did not move. Through their bond, Roy felt her caution. Not fear, just careful observation. I saw something on the security feeds 3 days ago, Dennis admitted. Heat signatures from your quarters that didn't make sense. Power usage off the charts. I thought maybe you were running some kind of illegal operation. He laughed, a bitter sound. Never imagined this. Are you going to report us? Roy asked. Report what? That dragons exist? That one hatched in a garbage container on my watch. Dennis shook his head. The consortium would take her, cut her open to see how she works, use her DNA to make weapons or worse. He looked at Roy. Lily says you want to take her to Redstone, to the sanctuary in the mountains. It's the only place she'll be safe. Redstone will kill you both. The atmosphere alone will manage, Roy interrupted. We have to try. Dennis was quiet for a long time. He stared at Brightscale, and something in his expression shifted. Pain, old and deep, surfaced in his eyes. I had a family once, he said quietly. Wife and 2 kids. They died in the collapse when Redstone's terraforming failed. I was off-world on business. By the time I got back, the atmosphere had turned toxic and the evacuation was a disaster. I never even found their bodies. Roy did not know what to say. He had always thought Dennis was just a bitter old man who hated his job and everyone around him. I've spent 20 years up here processing garbage because I couldn't leave the last place I saw them alive, Dennis continued. Couldn't move on. Couldn't forgive myself for not being there. He looked at Roy. You remind me of my son. Same age he would have been. Same quiet determination. Brightscale made a soft sound. She moved forward slowly and pressed her head against Dennis's hand. The supervisor froze, then slowly touched the dragon's scales. His eyes widened. I can feel her, he whispered. In my mind, she's showing me something. Through their bond, Roy felt what Brightscale was doing. She was sharing a memory with Dennis, one of her inherited memories. Roy saw it too. A world like Redstone before the collapse, green and thriving. Dragons flew above cities where humans and other species lived in peace. There was no fear, no war, just coexistence. The memory faded. Dennis pulled his hand back, tears running down his face. She showed me what Redstone used to be, he said. What it could be again. Will you help us? Lily asked from the doorway. Roy had not heard her arrive. Dennis wiped his eyes and straightened. The old supervisor was back, gruff and practical. Base 7 has 3 old military shuttles, he said. Colony defense ships from before the collapse. They've been mothballed for 20 years, but I kept them maintained. Couldn't bring myself to scrap them. He pulled out an access card. This will get you into the bay. The shuttle farthest from the door is the best one. It's got military-grade shields and weapons, enough to handle Redstone's atmosphere and fight off pursuit if necessary. The hunters will kill you for helping us, Roy said. Let them try. I've been dead for 20 years anyway. Maybe it's time I did something worth living for. Dennis handed the card to Lily. You've got 4 days before the Iron Jaw arrives. I moved up their arrival in the station logs to buy you time. Get to the sanctuary. Keep her safe. Over the next 3 days, they prepared. Lily and Dennis smuggled supplies to Base 7 while Roy stayed with Brightscale, keeping her hidden as she continued to grow. The dragon was now too large to fit comfortably in his quarters. She spent most of her time curled in the center of the room while Roy organized their escape. That Brightscale's inherited memories became clearer as she matured. Through their bond, Roy learned about dragons and their purpose. They were not just animals or pets. Dragons were guardians created by an ancient race, designed to protect younger civilizations from destroying themselves. They've bonded with other species because partnership prevented corruption. A dragon bonded to a human shared that human's emotions and thoughts. They could not be commanded to do evil because they would feel the wrongness of it. That was why the consortium feared them. Bonded pairs could not be controlled through fear or manipulation. They stood together against tyranny. The Great War had been the consortium's attempt to eliminate that threat. They hunted dragons to extinction and rewrote history to erase the partnership that had existed. They turned guardians into monsters in old stories, made people fear the very creatures who had protected them. But some dragons had seen the war coming. They hid eggs in secret vaults across the galaxy, protected by technology and magic that would keep the eggs viable for thousands of years. Waiting for a time when it would be safe to hatch. Brightscale's egg had been found by smugglers who did not understand what they had. They sold it as an alien artifact to collectors. The transport ship carrying it was attacked by pirates and left drifting in space. And finally, decades or maybe centuries later, it ended up in a garbage container on Clearwater Station, where Roy found it. On the 4th day, alarms screamed through the station. The Iron Jaw had arrived early, cutting through space faster than Dennis had calculated. Lily burst into Roy's quarters, face pale. They're docking now, she gasped. We need to move. Roy grabbed the emergency pack they had prepared. Brightscale stood, her head nearly touching the ceiling now. She was magnificent, scales bright as molten gold, wings folded against her body. Through their bond, Roy felt her determination. She was ready. They ran through empty corridors toward Base 7. Dennis had cleared the route, sending other workers on false emergency calls to different parts of the station. But they could hear boots behind them. Hunter teams had deployed faster than expected. Base 7's door opened to Dennis's access card. Inside, 3 sleek military shuttles waited in the dim light. They headed for the farthest one. The shuttle Dennis had promised was ready. Then alarms sounded again. The bay doors began to close. Someone had overridden Dennis's access. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before Hunter teams arrived. Get her inside, Lily shouted, running for the shuttle's ramp. I'll handle the launch sequence. Roy and Brightscale raced up the ramp. The shuttle's interior was cramped, designed for soldiers, not dragons. Brightscale barely fit, her wings scraping the walls. Roy strapped himself into the pilot's seat while Lily's fingers flew over the controls. Explosions echoed through the bay. The hunters were breaching the main door. Roy saw them on the external cameras, 12 armed figures in black armor, led by a woman with cold eyes and a plasma rifle. Got it, Lily yelled. The engines roared to life. Hold on. The shuttle lurched forward. Base 7's launch doors were still sealed. They were not going to make it. The shuttle could not break through reinforced steel. Then Brightscale roared. The sound shook the entire shuttle. Golden light erupted from the dragon's body, flowing through the ship's systems. Roy felt power surge through their bond, ancient and vast. The shuttle's engines blazed brighter than they should. The shields strengthened beyond their normal capacity. And when they hit the bay doors, those doors shattered like glass. They burst into space with hunter fire chasing them, and dove toward Redstone's swirling toxic clouds below. Two consortium fighter craft peeled away from the Iron Jaw and dove after them. Roy had basic pilot training from his youth, enough to fly cargo shuttles between stations, but nothing that prepared him for combat. His hands shook on the controls as the fighters closed the distance. "They're locking weapons," Lily shouted from the co-pilot's seat. She was trying to boost the shields, but the system was decades old and barely responding. Brightscale pressed against Roy's seat from behind. Through their bond, he felt something strange. The dragon was not afraid. She was excited, almost eager. Ancient instincts were awakening. Knowledge passed down through generations of dragons who had fought in battles among the stars. Roy felt Brightscale's presence merge with his own consciousness. His hands moved on the controls with confidence he did not possess moments before. The shuttle banked hard left just as plasma fire streaked through the space where they had been. Roy pulled into a spiral dive that should have been impossible for a ship this size. "How are you doing that?" Lily gasped, gripping her seat as they spun through evasive maneuvers. "I'm not," Roy said. "We are." Brightscale's knowledge flooded through him. The dragon understood flight in ways humans could only dream of. She knew how to read opponents, predict their movements, use momentum and gravity as weapons. Roy's hands moved, but it was Brightscale's instincts guiding them. Missiles launched from the pursuing fighters. 6 heat-seeking projectiles that would shred their shuttle in seconds. Roy felt panic spike, but Brightscale's calm pushed it down. The dragon roared, and golden light pulsed through the shuttle again. The light erupted outward in a wave. When it hit the missiles, their guidance systems went haywire. They spun off course, two colliding with each other in bright explosions while the others careened into empty space. What was that? Lily stared at the displays, showing the dissipating energy wave. "Dragon power," Roy said, understanding flowing for Brightscale. "They can disrupt technology. That's why the consortium feared them. All their weapons, all their control systems, dragons could shut them down." The fighters were closing in again, adapting their tactics. But Redstone loomed ahead, its toxic atmosphere churning with electrical storms. The fighters would have to break off soon or risk their own ships. Roy pushed the shuttle into a steep descent. They hit the atmosphere hard. The hull screamed as toxic gases battered the shields. Lightning arced across their path, each bolt powerful enough to fry their systems. Through the cockpit window, Roy saw the fighters pull up and away. They were not willing to follow into this hell. But the danger was far from over. The shields were failing. Hull plates began to burn. Alarms shrieked from every console. They were coming in too fast, the angle too steep. They were going to crash. "Brace for impact," Roy yelled. He tried to level out, but the controls were not responding. The mountain range rushed up to meet them, jagged peaks tearing through the toxic clouds. Brightscale roared again. Roy felt the dragon's power surge through their bond. More than before, everything she had. Golden light enveloped the shuttle like a second skin. The burning stopped. The shaking smoothed out. They were still falling, but Brightscale's barrier was protecting them. They hit the mountainside hard enough to shatter the shuttle's landing gear. The ship skipped like a stone across rock and ice, tearing a path through the wasteland. They slammed into a cliff face and finally stopped. Silence fell. "What is Yihon?" His body ached from the impact. Beside him, Lily groaned and moved slowly, checking herself for injuries. Behind them, Brightscale lay still, her scales dim and her breathing shallow. "We're alive," Lily whispered. "How are we alive?" Roy unbuckled and crawled to Brightscale. The dragon had exhausted herself, protecting them. Through their bond, he felt her weakness. She had used too much power too quickly. She needed rest, food, and safety. "We need to move," Roy said. "The hunters saw where we went down. They'll come for us." They gathered what supplies had survived the crash. Emergency rations, water recyclers, respirators to filter the toxic air, basic medical supplies. The shuttle was destroyed, its hull cracked, and engines dead. No way to call for help even if there was anyone to call. Outside, Redstone's surface was worse than Roy had imagined. The sky was a sickly orange color, thick with toxic clouds that burned his eyes even through the respirator. The ground was rocky and barren, nothing growing anywhere. Lightning crackled constantly in the distance, and the wind carried a bitter chemical smell. Brightscale struggled to her feet. The dragon was weak but determined. Through their bond, she shared direction. The sanctuary was ahead, deeper into the mountains. They had to keep moving. They walked for hours. Roy and Lily leaned on each other for support, while Brightscale limped beside them. The dragon's inherited memories guided them along ancient paths that had not been used in thousands of years. Paths that dragons and their companions had once traveled freely. They found ruins along the way. Structures built into the mountainside, weathered by time, but still recognizable. Landing platforms large enough for ships and for flying creatures. Carved symbols and languages Roy did not know, but somehow understood through Brightscale. These were rest stops, waypoints on the journey to the sanctuary that on the second day, they encountered Redstone's native wildlife. Creatures that had adapted to the toxic environment, living in the deep places where the atmosphere was less deadly. Rock serpents with crystalline scales that could burrow through solid stone. Spider-like creatures that wove webs from mineral compounds. The creatures should have been hostile. This was their territory, and humans were invaders. But Brightscale moved ahead and made sounds Roy had never heard before. Not roars or growls, but something more complex. Communication. The rock serpents and crystal spiders stopped. They watched the dragon with what looked like recognition. Then they moved aside, clearing a path. They remember, Lily whispered. Even after thousands of years, they remember what dragons are. That night, they made camp in a ruined structure that still had most of its roof. They shared rations and purified water. Brightscale ate mineral compounds from the emergency supplies, but it was not enough. She was growing weaker. We're being followed, Lily said, checking a small scanner she had saved from the crash. Multiple heat signatures closing in from the crash site. Roy felt it too, through his bond with Brightscale. The hunters were coming. They had landed in the mountains and were tracking them. Iris Stone, the leader Roy had seen on the security feeds, was relentless. How far to the sanctuary? Roy asked Brightscale. Images flooded his mind. A massive gate carved into the mountain itself. A cavern filled with golden light. Safety and power and healing. But it was still 2 days away at their current pace. They would never make it before the hunters caught up. Explosions lit up the night. The hunters had found them. Plasma fire tore through the ruins, shattering ancient stone. Roy grabbed Lily and dove for cover, while Brightscale spread her wings, trying to shield them despite her weakness. Iris Stone stepped into the firelight, her weapon trained on the dragon. Behind her, 8 more hunters fanned out in tactical formation. Interesting specimen, Iris said, her voice cold and clinical. Bigger than I expected, and clearly bonded to you. She looked at Roy. We'll take both. The consortium will pay well for a dragon and its companion. You'll have to kill us first, Roy said. That can be arranged, Iris replied. Brightscale roared weakly. Golden light flickered around her, but barely formed. She was too exhausted. She could not protect them this time. The hunters advanced. Their weapons charged, ready to fire. Roy stood in front of Brightscale, knowing it was useless but unable to do anything else. He had promised to protect her, even if it cost him everything. Then the ground shook. A deep rumble echoed through the mountains. The hunters stumbled, looking around in confusion. From the darkness above, something massive descended. Wings that spanned 50 feet blocked out the toxic clouds. Scales that gleamed like molten bronze caught the firelight. Eyes that burned with ancient intelligence fixed on the hunters, another dragon. Bigger than Brightscale, older, scars covering its body. And on its back, riding with casual confidence, was a human woman wearing the armor of the old Guardian Order. You picked the wrong mountain to hunt on, the woman called down to Iris Stone. These are dragonlands, and we protect our own. The bronze dragon landed with enough force to crack the ancient stone beneath its feet. The woman on its back dismounted smoothly, drawing a weapon that looked like it belonged in a museum. Not a plasma rifle like the hunters carried, but something older. A lance that crackled with energy similar to what Brightscale produced. "I am River Quinn," the woman announced. Her armor was battered and worn, covered in scars from countless battles. She looked maybe 40 years old, but her eyes held centuries of knowledge. Guardian of the Southern Sanctuary and bonded companion to Ironhide. She gestured to the massive dragon beside her. "You've entered protected territory." Iris Stone raised her weapon. "The Consortium has authority across all." "The Consortium has no authority here," River interrupted. "These mountains belonged to dragons long before humans built their first ships, long before the Consortium existed. And they'll belong to dragons long after the Consortium falls." The hunters opened fire. Plasma bolts lit up the night, all aimed at River and Ironhide. The bronze dragon roared and golden light erupted from his body. The same power Brightscale wielded, but magnified 100 times. The plasma fire simply stopped in midair, frozen by the disruption field. Then Ironhide breath fire. Not normal flames, but white-hot energy that melted stone and turned the hunters' weapons into slag. They scattered, trying to find cover, but River was already moving. She fought with the lance like it was part of her body, striking with precision that came from decades of training. Within minutes, half the hunters were down. The rest fled into the darkness, including Iris Stone, who retreated while firing covering shots. "They'll be back," River said, walking over to where Roy, Lily, and Brightscale huddled. "The Consortium doesn't give up easily." She looked at Brightscale, and her expression softened. "Hello, little one. It's been a long time since I've seen a new hatchling." Brightscale made a weak chirping sound. Through their bond, Roy felt the dragon's relief and hope. River knelt and placed a hand on Brightscale's scales. "She's exhausted," River said. "Used too much power before she was ready. We need to get her to the sanctuary." She looked at Roy. "You're her companion?" "Yes," Roy said. "My name is Roy. This is Lily. We're trying to reach the sanctuary to keep Brightscale safe." "The sanctuary is a day's flight from here on Ironhide. 2 days on foot, and your dragon can't walk that far." River studied Roy carefully. "The bond is strong between you. Stronger than most I've seen. How long since she hatched?" 3 weeks. River's eyebrows rose. 3 weeks, and already this powerful? Remarkable. She turned to Ironhide, and they seemed to communicate silently, the same way Roy and Brightscale did. "We'll carry you. All 3 of you." Flying on Dragonback was nothing like flying in a shuttle. Ironhide's scales were warm beneath Roy's legs. The dragon's wings beat with rhythmic power that he felt in his chest. The wind tore at his clothes, and the toxic air burned his throat despite the respirator. But none of that mattered. He was flying on a dragon with Brightscale pressed against his side and Lily holding tight behind him. River rode at the front, completely at ease. She and Ironhide moved as one being, the same way Roy and Brightscale were beginning to. Through the bond, Roy felt Brightscale's wonder. She had never truly flown before, just short glides in cramped quarters. Now, she was experiencing what dragons were meant for. They flew through the night and into the next day. The mountains passed beneath them, jagged and desolate. Occasionally, Roy saw ruins, remnants of the civilization that had thrived here before the collapse. Before the Consortium's terraforming attempt went wrong and poisoned the world, or maybe it had not gone wrong. Maybe it was deliberate, a way to destroy one of the last dragon sanctuaries. "Here," River called back. She pointed ahead to where the mountains rose even higher. The southern sanctuary. A massive gate was carved into the cliff face, hundreds of feet tall. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with internal light. As they approached, the symbols blazed brighter. The gate recognized Ironhide, recognized what they were. The stone doors swung open silently. Inside was a cavern so vast Roy could not see the far walls. Golden light filled the space, coming from pools of glowing liquids scattered throughout. Structures rose from the cavern floor, buildings and platforms designed for creatures that could fly. And everywhere, carved into every surface, were images of dragons and humans together. Ironhide landed on a wide platform near one of the glowing pools. River helped them down, then immediately led Brightscale to the pool's edge. "This is dragon's blood," River explained. "Not literal blood, but essence. The life force of dragons concentrated over thousands of years. It heals, it strengthens, it connects us to our heritage." Brightscale did not hesitate. The dragon walked into the pool, and the liquid surged up to meet her. Golden light enveloped Brightscale completely. Through their bond, Roy felt power flowing into the dragon, mending the damage, restoring what had been lost. When Brightscale emerged, she was transformed. Her scales blazed like the sun. She had grown again, now the size of a horse, with wings that looked strong enough to carry her across continents. The dragon spread those wings and roared, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the cavern. "She's magnificent," Lily whispered. River smiled. "She'll be even more magnificent when she's fully grown. Dragons don't stop growing for decades." She gestured for them to follow. "Gulme, you have questions. I have answers. And we have very little time before the consortium comes in force." They sat in what River called the Hall of Bonds, a circular room where the walls showed images of every partnership between dragons and companions throughout history. Thousands of pairs, maybe millions, all gone now except for River and Ironhide. "I thought all dragons died in the Great War," Roy said. "Most did," River replied, "but a few survived in hidden sanctuaries like this one. My family has guarded this place for 10 generations, waiting for the day when it would be safe for dragons to return." She looked sad. "We thought that day would never come. The consortium is too powerful, too entrenched. But then you found Brightscale. Why is one egg so important?" Lily asked. "Because she's not alone," River said. "The dragons who died in the Great War hid thousands of eggs across the galaxy. They put them in stasis, protected by technology and ancient power. The eggs were programmed to hatch when conditions were right, when someone worthy found them." Roy thought about the garbage container, the derelict ship, the improbable chain of events that led to him finding Brightscale. It had not been random. It had been designed. "The eggs recognize companions," River continued. "They respond to certain qualities: compassion, protectiveness, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Brightscale chose you, Roy. The moment you decided to save her instead of reporting her, the bond began forming." "What happens now?" Roy asked. "The consortium knows about Brightscale. They'll send more hunters. They'll send armies," River agreed. "But here's what they don't know. When one dragon hatches and bonds, it sends out a signal through the old network, a call to other eggs. I felt it 3 days ago, a pulse of power I haven't sensed in decades. That's how I knew to come looking for you." She walked to the wall and touched one of the carved images. It came to life, showing a map of the galaxy. Lights began appearing across it, hundreds of them, then thousands. "These are eggs responding to Brightscale's call," River said. "All across the galaxy, they're waking up. Some will be found by smugglers or criminals, but others will be found by people like you. People who will protect them, bond with them, help them grow." "The Age of Dragons is returning," Lily breathed. "Yes," River said, "and the consortium will do everything in their power to stop it. They'll hunt every hatchling. They'll destroy every sanctuary. They'll kill anyone who stands against them." Roy looked at Brightscale. The dragon met his eyes, and through their bond, he felt her determination. She had not survived being frozen in space for decades, just to hide in a cave. "Then we fight," Roy said. River's smile was fierce. "Then we fight, and we find others. Every egg that hatches, every companion who bonds, makes us stronger. The consortium built an empire on fear and control. But dragons don't know fear, and bonded pairs cannot be controlled." Alarms suddenly blared through the sanctuary. Ironhide roared a warning. River ran to a crystal display that showed the cavern entrance. Consortium ships were landing outside. Dozens of them. Iris Stone had called for reinforcements. "They found us faster than I expected," River said grimly. She looked at Roy and Brightscale. "Can you fight?" Through their bond, Roy felt Brightscale's answer. The dragon was healed, strong, and ready. And so was he. The consortium forces came in waves. First the soldiers, armored figures carrying weapons designed to kill dragons. They poured through the sanctuary gates while dropships circled overhead. Then came the mechs, 20-foot-tall machines bristling with cannons and missiles. Finally, Iris Stone herself arrived in a command walker, a massive vehicle that shook the ground with each step. "This is your last chance to surrender." Iris's voice boomed through speakers. "Give us the dragons, and you'll be allowed to leave. Resist, and you'll be eliminated." River stood at the edge of the platform with Ironhide beside her. Roy and Brightscale joined them, with Lily taking position at a nearby defense console that somehow still worked after thousands of years. "We've heard that threat before," River called back. 300 years ago, the Consortium made the same offer. "Surrender the dragons or die." "Do you know what happened?" "The dragons died," Iris said. "And so did their companions." "No," River corrected. "The dragons sacrificed themselves so their children could live. They gave everything to hide those eggs, to protect the future. And now that future is here." She raised her lance. "You want our dragons? Come and take them." The battle began. Consortium soldiers surged forward, and Ironhide met them with fire. But this was not the white-hot breath he had used before. This was something more controlled, more precise. The flames washed over the soldiers without burning them, but their weapons melted and their armor systems failed. They fell back in confusion. Brightscale roared, and her own power joined Ironhide's. The two dragons created overlapping disruption fields that turned the Consortium's advanced technology into useless metal. Plasma rifles stopped firing. Targeting systems went dark. The mechs stumbled as their control systems crashed. Roy felt the strain through his bond with Brightscale. This took immense energy and concentration. But the dragon was not struggling alone. Roy lent his own will, his own strength. They were partners, bonded, and together they were more than the sum of their parts. "They're adapting," Lily shouted from the console, "switching to older weapons that don't rely on advanced electronics." She was right. Consortium soldiers were pulling out ballistic weapons, explosives, anything that would work without computer systems. The mechs were being piloted manually now, slower but still dangerous. Iris Stone's command walker opened fire with massive cannons. The shells were old-fashioned explosives that the disruption field could not stop. They slammed into the platform, shattering ancient stone. "We can't hold the entrance," River said. She made a decision. "Fall back to the inner sanctuary. There's another defense there, something the old Guardians left behind." They retreated deeper into the cavern, while Consortium forces poured in behind them. The inner sanctuary was a smaller chamber with a single pool of dragon's blood at its center. Around the pool stood 7 statues of dragons, each one carved from a different colored stone. "The 7 guardians," River said. "They gave their essence to create this sanctuary. Their power still remains." She looked at Roy and Brightscale. "But it needs to be awakened. It needs a sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Roy asked. "Not death," River assured him, "but connection. You and Brightscale must join with the pool completely. Let the dragon's blood flow through both of you. It will hurt. It might destroy you. But if you survive, you'll become something new. Something the Consortium has never faced." Roy looked at Brightscale. Through their bond, he felt the dragon's understanding and acceptance. They had come too far to turn back now. "Tell me what to do," Roy said. The explosion that followed destroyed the entrance to the inner sanctuary. Iris Stone strode through the smoke with a squad of elite soldiers behind her. She saw Roy and Brightscale at the pool's edge and smiled coldly. "End of the line," she said. "No more running. No more fighting. It's over." "You're right," Roy said. "It is over. For you." He stepped into the pool with Brightscale beside him. The dragon's blood surged up immediately, recognizing them, welcoming them. Roy felt it flow into his body, burning like liquid fire. Through the bond, he felt Brightscale experiencing the same agony and transcendence. Their minds merged completely. Roy could not tell where he ended and Brightscale began. He saw through her eyes, felt with her senses, knew her thoughts as his own. And she knew him the same way. Every memory, every fear, every hope. The 7 statues around the pool began to glow. The essences of ancient dragons, preserved for this moment, flowed into Roy and Brightscale. Knowledge of battles fought across millennia. Wisdom gathered from countless civilizations. Power refined through ages of guardianship. When Roy and Brightscale emerged from the pool, they were transformed. The dragon had grown to match Ironhide in size, scales blazing with light that shifted through every color. And Roy, still human in form, had scales of his own now. His eyes glowed gold like bright scales. Power crackled around him like visible energy. Iris Stone stared in shock. "What are you?" "We are Guardian," Roy said, his voice echoing with Brightscale's deeper tones. "We are what the Consortium tried to destroy. We are what your empire fears most." They moved as one being. When Brightscale flew, Roy flew with her without needing to ride. When Roy raised his hand, Brightscale's power flowed through it. They fought the Consortium forces with perfect coordination, not two beings working together, but one consciousness in two forms. The disruption field they created was absolute. Every piece of Consortium technology within 100 yards simply stopped working. Weapons fell apart. Armor seized up. The command walker toppled as its systems died. Iris Stone tried to run, but River blocked her path, lance at the ready. "It's over," River said. "Call off your forces. The Consortium will never stop." Iris spat. "You've won this battle, but there will be others. Fleets will come. Armies will let them come," Roy said. He and Brightscale stood together, two bodies, but one presence. "We're not hiding anymore. We're not running. And we're not alone." Through the bond that now connected him to the ancient network of dragons, Roy felt it. Across the galaxy, eggs were hatching. Companions were bonding. New guardians were awakening. Not hundreds, but thousands. All responding to the call that Brightscale had sent out, amplified by the power of the sanctuary. "The age of the guardians has returned," Roy continued. "Tell the Consortium. Tell them that dragons protect the galaxy now. And anyone who threatens the innocent will answer to us." Weeks later, Roy stood on a mountain peak outside the sanctuary with Brightscale beside him. Below, Redstone was changing. Ships were landing, not Consortium warships, but civilian transports. People were coming back to reclaim the world, drawn by news that the planet was protected now. Dennis Park had arrived 3 days ago with a group of workers from Clearwater Station. They were helping to establish a settlement near the sanctuary, a place where dragons and companions could gather, where the old knowledge could be preserved and shared. Lily worked in the communications center, coordinating with other sanctuaries across the galaxy. River's predictions had been right. Thousands of eggs had hatched in the weeks since Brightscale's awakening. Each one had found a companion. Each bond was unique, but powerful. "How many now?" Dennis asked, climbing up to join Roy on the peak. The old supervisor looked younger somehow, like helping to build something good had given him purpose again. 7,412 confirmed hatchings, Roy said. "More every day. The Consortium is trying to suppress the news, but they can't stop it. People are seeing dragons in their skies again. They're remembering what was lost." 3 shapes appeared in the distance, flying toward them. Dragons, each carrying a human companion. They landed on nearby peaks, and Roy felt their presences through the network. A young woman bonded to a silver dragon in the core worlds. An old man bonded to a scarred green dragon on the frontier. A child bonded to a tiny red dragon that had just hatched yesterday. All of them connected. All of them guardians. "The Consortium is pulling back from contested systems," Dennis reported. "They're consolidating their forces around their core territories. They know they can't fight us all. They'll try eventually," Roy said. "Fear makes people do foolish things. Then we'll be ready." Brightscale's voice echoed in his mind and through the bond to all the other guardians. "We were created to protect. That's what we'll do." Roy thought about the journey that had brought him here. Finding an egg in a garbage container. A discarded treasure that nobody wanted. Taking it home because something in him could not bear to leave it behind. Watching Brightscale hatch and making that instant decision to protect her no matter what. All of that had led to this moment. To the rebirth of the Guardians. To hope returning to a galaxy that had lived under the Consortium's fear for too long. More dragons appeared on the horizon. More companions joining them. The mountain peaks filled with their presence until the sky was full of wings and light. What happens now? Lily asked, joining them on the peak. Roy looked at all the gathered guardians, felt their determination through the network, and smiled. Now we show the galaxy what dragons really are, he said. Not monsters from old stories. Not weapons to be controlled, but guardians, protectors, friends. Brightscale spread her wings and roared, a sound of joy and challenge that echoed across Redstone and beyond. The other dragons joined her, their voices rising together in harmony. And across the galaxy, in forgotten corners and hidden places, more eggs began to glow. More companions waited to be found. More guardians prepared to awaken. The last dragon egg had hatched in a garbage yard, rejected and discarded by a galaxy that had forgotten what dragons meant. But from that humble beginning, the Age of Guardians was reborn, and nothing would ever be the same.